Okay, class, let's list off the books again. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth.
Ew, school.
Goodbye. Samuel. What? No, Lucy, come back. Ugh. Don't you want to learn something new?
I have learned that I will always learn something new. Memorizing Bible books isn't something I want to learn.
It is a bit repetitive.
But that's how you remember it. Besides, haven't you looked at your fellow classmate?
The fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, and Peter. Fair point.
Let's move on to another topic. You want to join us, Lucy?
Yeah, no thank you. There's a reason why I went into pirating.
Well, in that case, let's talk about the kings of Israel.
Kings?
Well, maybe I'll stick around. Kings of Israel are pretty interesting, especially during difficult times. For many books of the Old Testament, Israel was a very broken kingdom. They had a hard time listening to God and following His instructions. God's relationship with His people was falling apart.
And that's what the prophets were for. Messengers from God to the people.
Like when we talked about Jonah. Except Jonah wasn't the greatest prophet. Focus, we're talking about different kings. Like this guy. This is Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a good king that listened to God and spoke a lot to Him through prayer. When Hezekiah was king, a huge enemy army came through to try and conquer Israel. Hezekiah prayed to God, and because God knew that Hezekiah was a king that honored Him, God protected Israel and the enemy did not win.
Hezekiah honored God and helped protect Israel from enemies.
Good! Now let's talk about this king. This guy's name was Josiah. Josiah was a super young king. He became ruler of Israel when he was 8 years old. Could you imagine being in charge of an entire kingdom in the 3rd grade?
Gee, the only thing I ever accomplished in the 3rd grade was raising enough money to buy a guinea pig.
Weird. Josiah had a big challenge. As he was fixing up the temple, he discovered that the people of Israel were not following a ton of rules God had given them. So Josiah made a covenant. What on earth is a covenant? Oh, it's like a promise. A very big promise. Josiah promised that he would do better than the people in the past and return to listening and following God's directions and rules. Ew, rules. That's it, I'm out. What? No, Lucy, get back here! God's rules are different from rules we have here on earth. How so? Well, the core of good rules is to help us succeed and stay safe. When a parent is telling their kid to clean up or to use their manners, those are rules that help you be a nice and polite person. Yeah, okay, I follow that. God's rules are more magnified. They focus on our relationship with Him and what we need to do to strengthen that relationship. God understands that rules will be broken. It's a part of having sin in our world. But King Josiah's goal was to make the people aware of how they needed to focus on God's rules and reconnect back to the Creator. Okay, that makes some sense. But still, when you mentioned Israel kings, I thought you'd talk about the wacky ones. Like the one that worshipped another god with his wife and then the prophet Elijah had to swing by and kick his behind.
That's the strangest way I've ever heard that story get told.
Well, you do have a point, Lucy. Not all of Israel's kings were honoring to God. There were many that followed God, but there were also many that were led astray and disconnected from God. The point of learning about all of these kings is to serve as an example for us today. Would you want to be like the king that was led astray, or like Hezekiah and Josiah that were grounded in their faith and determined to stay close to God? I suppose I'd want to be a well-rounded king, one with a good foundation.
I choose to be like Hezekiah. And I choose to be like Jomama. Oh, I meant Josiah.
Whenever reading the tales from the Old Testament, it's important to remember that they were all real people with faults, just like us. Which brings us to our last subject for today, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah.
Wait, he wasn't a king. He's a prophet, right? That's right. Jeremiah was a prophet, a messenger of God. But he had some things in common with Hezekiah and Josiah. Can anyone guess what that was?
Oh, I know. They all had names that start with consonants. He's not wrong, but he's not right either.
Wait, you mean that whole warning the people of their sin thing? Did Jeremiah also do that? Correct! Jeremiah warned the people that their sin and disobedience to God would result in being conquered by many enemies. Now, while that sounds really awful, remember that God is always with us, no matter what happens. He was with his people, even when they were captured by their enemies. Once again, we see people sinning and a king or prophet trying to help them reconnect with God and make a covenant to stay true to him. And that's our big word today, covenant.
Covenant.
And Lucy, you were an excellent student today. You get a gold star. What? I told you I didn't want to do school. I don't need to learn. But since you're offering, I suppose I will take that gold star. Yeah. You know, you're always really helpful, Lucy, even when you're not trying. 'Tis me gift and me curse. Goodbye! Wait, you're just cutting it off here? That's all you have? Okay, goodbye.